Good morning everyone. From today we'll begin with the anatomy of the neck. In this lecture we are going to study in detail about the deep fascia of the neck, also known as the cervical fascia. After studying this lecture, you should be able to describe the parts, the extent, the attachments and the modifications of various layers of the deep cervical fascia. You should also be able to describe the facial spaces of the neck and their role in spread of infections. Let us first study about the boundaries of the site of the neck. As you can see that the side of the neck is roughly quadrilateral in outline. It is bounded anteriorly by the anterior median line, posteriorly by the anterior border of the trapezius muscle, superiorly by the base of the mandible, an imaginary line extending from the angle of the mandible up to the mastoid process, and the superior nuchal line. Inferiorly by the superior surface of the clavicle. Now this quadrilateral space is divided obliquely by a muscle known as the sternocleidomastoid muscle into a triangle in front of it, that is known as the anterior triangle, and a triangle behind it lying between the trapezius and the sternocleidomastoid muscle known as the posterior triangle. So what are the layers that you will encounter when you will perform the dissection of the neck? So the first or the superficial most layer that you will come across is the skin. So this skin of the neck is supplied by the second, third and the fourth cervical nerves. The anterolateral part of the neck is supplied by the anterior primary rami through four cutaneous nerves. You will study in detail about these four cutaneous nerves in posterior triangle. The posterior part of the skin of the neck is supplied by the posterior primary or the dorsal primary rami. Deep to the skin lies the superficial fascia. Now this superficial fascia, like in other places, contains areolar tissue, cutaneous nerves, cutaneous vessels, lymph vessels and the lymph nodes. In addition, the superficial fascia of the neck contains a cutaneous muscle known as the platysma. All the cutaneous nerves and vessels lie deep to this platysma muscle. As you can see that the platysma muscle takes its origin from the skin and the deep fascia covering the upper parts of the pectoralis major and the anterior part of the deltoid fascia. The fibers travels upward, forward and medially. Most of the fibers are inserted on the base of the mandible. Few anterior fibers decussate with the similar fibers of the opposite side, whereas the few posterior fibers cross the angle of the mouth and they are merged with the risorius muscle. As you have already read in the face, the platysma muscle is supplied by the cervical branch of the facial nerve. Now, what are the actions of this platysma? Acting from above, the muscle will help in producing the vertical ridges in the skin of the neck. This will help in releasing the pressure over the underlying veins, which further helps in venous return. Acting from below, the mandible, the platysma muscle will depress the mandible and it will draw the angle of the mouth downward and laterally, as in producing the expression of the terror and horror. Please remember that when suturing the neck wounds, surgeons should carefully suture the skin and the edges of the platysma, as skin wound will be pulled in a different direction by contracting platysma, resulting in broad and ugly scars. Deep to the superficial fascia in the neck lies the deep fascia, also known as the cervical fascia, also known as the fascia colli. This deep cervical fascia surrounds muscles in the neck, filling the spaces between the muscles, vessels, and viscera. The deep fascia of the neck is condensed to form the following layers. First, or the most superficial, is the investing layer, which encloses the entire neck like a collar, shown with blue color in this image. So this is your investing layer of the deep cervical fascia. Deep to that, the second layer shown with the yellow or the orange color is the pretracheal fascia, which encloses the viscera of the neck. Behind that, or deep to that, there is third layer shown with pink color, known as the prevertebral fascia. This prevertebral fascia surrounds the vertebral column and the deep muscles associated with the back. Apart from these three layers, there is another layer known as the carotid sheath, which receives the contribution from the other layers and surround the major neurovascular bundle on either side of the neck. Let us now see the horizontal disposition of this investing layer. On tracing from medial to lateral side horizontally, you will notice that this investing layer splits to enclose first the sternocleidomastoid muscle, then it forms the roof of the anterior triangle, roof of the posterior triangle, reaches the trapezius muscle, and then splits to enclose this trapezius muscle. On tracing this investing layer vertically, you will see that inferiorly it splits to enclose two spaces. A space medially above the sternum known as the suprasternal space of Burns, and a space laterally above the clavicle known as the supraclavicular space. The suprasternal space of Burns contains the sternal head of the sternocleidomastoid muscle, the lower ends of the anterior jugular vein, jugular venous arch which connects the two anterior jugular vein, the interclavicular ligament, and the lymph nodes. You will study about these structures in the triangles of neck, and then you will be able to understand them better. Above the clavicle, middle 1/3 of the clavicle, it contains the terminal part of the external jugular vein and the supraclavicular nerves. Now, behind the supraclavicular space, the posterior layer will enclose the inferior belly of the omohyoid and it will become continuous with the clavipectoral fascia. Superiorly, as the muscle is traced upward, it will split to enclose two glands. What are the two glands above? A parotid gland and the submandibular gland. So when it encloses the parotid gland, the superficial layer passes over it and gets attached to the lower border of the zygomatic arch, whereas the deeper layer goes and gets attached to the tympanic plate and the styloid process. Now please remember that this part of the investing layer, which covers the anterior surface of the parotid gland, is thickened to form the parotidomesenteric fascia. This parotidomesenteric fascia is unyielding, so any swelling or inflammation of the parotid gland, for example in mumps, is very painful. Similarly, the deep fascia posterior lamina between the styloid process and the angle of the mandible is thickened to form a ligament known as the stylomandibular ligament. This stylomandibular ligament separates the parotid gland from the submandibular gland. Now seeing how it encloses, let's see how it encloses the submandibular gland. The superficial layer goes and gets attached to the base of the mandible, whereas the deep layer passes through the deep surface of the submandibular gland and gets attached on the mylohyoid line. So, please remember, on tracing vertically, the investing layer will enclose inferiorly two spaces, the suprasternal space medially and the supraclavicular space laterally. On tracing superiorly, it will split to enclose two glands, the parotid gland and the submandibular gland. And on horizontal tracing, it will split to enclose two muscles, that is the sternocleidomastoid and the trapezius muscle, forming the roof of the triangles of the neck in between the two muscles. A word about the clinical anatomy of the investing layer. The external jugular vein will pierce the investing layer in the posterior triangle of the neck to go deep inside. While it is piercing the investing layer, its walls become adherent to the surrounding fascia. So any cut in the external jugular vein, the cut edges will remain retracted and will not collapse. This results in profuse bleeding. Also, the air can be sucked here due to the negative intrathoracic pressure, resulting in sudden death by the air embolism. I've already told you about the parotidomesenteric fascia, that how it is unyielding, resulting in lot of pain in the parotid swelling. Coming to the pretracheal fascia. Pretracheal fascia consists of collection of fascias that surrounds the trachea, oesophagus and the two lobes of the thyroid gland. On tracing this pretracheal fascia horizontally, you will notice that it arises from the investing layer under the cover of the sternocleidomastoid muscle. So this is the sternocleidomastoid muscle. It arises from the investing layer under the cover of the sternocleidomastoid muscle. It will form the anterior wall of the carotid sheath. Then it will split to enclose the thyroid gland. Then it passes in front of the trachea, around the oesophagus, and will join with the similar fascia of the opposite side. Please remember that if you will trace this pretracheal fascia upward, you will notice that behind the pharynx, which is the upward continuation of the oesophagus, it becomes continuous as the buccopharyngeal fascia. So in this you can see, this is the red with red color is the investing layer, with blue color is the pretracheal fascia, where it is surrounding the thyroid gland. It is attached above to the hyoid bone, to the oblique line of the thyroid cartilage. Then it will surround the thyroid gland, and downward it is merging with the fibrous pericardium. Then this is your larynx, which is continuous with the trachea below. This is your pharynx, which is continuous with the oesophagus below. So over here you can see that the pretracheal fascia in front of the pharynx is continuous as the buccopharyngeal fascia. So this green colored one, this one is your buccopharyngeal fascia, which below is continuous with the pretracheal fascia. Let us see again the vertical disposition of the pretracheal fascia. Superiorly it is attached to the hyoid bone, to oblique line of the thyroid cartilage. Then it reaches the thyroid gland, splits to enclose the thyroid gland. Below it rejoins, and then it continues into the superior mediastinum along the great vessels and fuses with the fibrous pericardium. There is a ligament known as the ligament of Berry, which is the derivative of this layer and connects the cricoid cartilage with the thyroid gland. This is the reason why the thyroid gland moves with deglutition. So, if there is a swelling in the neck, the patient is asked to swallow his own saliva, and if the swelling, that particular swelling moves with the deglutition, then that means the swelling is related with the thyroid gland pathology. So, keep this point in your mind. Coming to the third layer, that is the prevertebral layer. So, on horizontally tracing this prevertebral fascia, you will notice that it will arise again from the sternum. It will arise beneath the sternocleidomastoid muscle, will pass medially forming the posterior wall of the carotid sheath, covering the cervical vertebrae and the prevertebral muscles. Medial to the scalenus muscle, the fascia is attached to the transverse process of the cervical vertebrae. Thereafter, this fascia splits into two layers. So you can see one, this anterior layer and this posterior layer. So the anterior layer is known as the alar fascia and the posterior layer is known as the prevertebral layer. The two alar fascia and the prevertebral layer will become continuous with the sibular fascia of the opposite sign after the midline. On vertically tracing the prevertebral layer, so superiorly both the alar fascia and the prevertebral fascia are attached to the base of the skull. Okay, now let us see again the three layers which we see here. So behind the pharynx, this is your buccopharyngeal fascia. Behind that, this is your alar fascia, and behind that, this is your prevertebral fascia. Okay, so on trace them downward. So the alar fascia, you can see here, blends with the buccopharyngeal fascia below, which covers the constrictors of the pharynx. So the alar fascia blends with the ends by blending with the buccopharyngeal fascia. Whereas the prevertebral layer will continue downward, enter the posterior mediastinum of the thorax, and there it will end by blending with the anterior longitudinal ligament of upper three thoracic vertebrae. Please remember that the cervical and the brachial plexus lie beneath this prevertebral layer. Okay, so the branches, the cutaneous branches which were supplying the neck were the branches of the cervical plexus. So in order to become cutaneous, they pierce this prevertebral layer. Also, as you have already read about the brachial plexus, you all know that the trunk of the brachial plexus and the subclavian artery passes from neck to the axilla. So when they are passing from neck to the axilla, they carry the layer. Since the brachial plexus is lying deep to the prevertebral layer, it will carry this layer of prevertebral fascia along with them in the axilla. This layer, prevertebral layer, is known as the axillary sheath. So axillary sheath is, you have already read about it, derived from the prevertebral fascia. Why it is important? Infections such as the tuberculosis of spine can result in pus collection in the neck, and this might extend through this route into the axilla. Let us now come to another important layer known as the carotid sheath. Now this carotid sheath extends from the base of the skull up to the arch of the aorta. How it is formed? As discussed, the interior layer is derived from the pretracheal fascia and the posterior layer is derived from the prevertebral layer of the deep cervical fascia. This carotid sheath is ill-defined over the veins to allow for their expansion during venous return. So what lies in the carotid sheath? Laterally. So this is trachea, this is thyroid gland, this is oesophagus, this is vertebrae. So this is medial, this is lateral. So laterally it contains the internal jugular vein. Medially in the lower part it contains the common carotid artery, whereas in the upper part it contains the internal carotid artery, as the external carotid artery leaves the carotid sheath to supply the face. In between the internal jugular vein and the external carotid artery lies the vagus nerve, located in a slight posterior plane between the two. Coming to the important relations of the carotid sheath, the anterior wall of the carotid sheath is related with the ansa cervicalis. We will study about it later. The posterior wall is related with the sympathetic trunk. Now, since we have covered the various layers of the deep cervical fascia, let us now study the spatial spaces formed between them in the head and neck region. So, between these spatial layers in the neck are the spaces which are filled with the loose connective tissue that may provide a path for the spread of infections from mouth, teeth, pharynx, oesophagus and neck to the mediastinum. The tough fascia can determine the direction of the spread of the infection and the path taken by pus. So it is important to know the anatomy of these layers of the deep cervical fascia. So what are the spaces which are formed between these layers? So this space is the superficial space which is formed between the investing layer and the skin. Then this is a central compartment, also known as the visceral compartment, surrounded by the pretracheal fascia. So it contains a pretracheal space and a oesophageal compartment. Then this is a carotid space surrounded by the carotid sheath. Okay. Then behind that, between the buccopharyngeal fascia and between the alar fascia, lies the retropharyngeal space. Next, between the alar fascia and the prevertebral layer lies the danger space or the third space. Then, between the prevertebral layer and the vertebrae and the muscles of the back and neck lies the prevertebral space. Okay, we are going to study only the clinically very important spaces in detail in the next few slides. So the spaces which are present below the hyoid bone includes the pretracheal space, the danger space, prevertebral space. The spaces present above the hyoid bone includes the retropharyngeal space, the lateral pharyngeal space, the submandibular space, masticatory space, the space for the submandibular gland and the space for the parotid gland. As I said, we will study only the very clinically very important spaces in the next few slides. So before going to the details of each of the important space, first understand few things. The tuberculous infection of the deep cervical lymph nodes will result in liquefaction of the lymph nodes. The pus will initially stay limited by the investing layer, but later on this pus will pass to the superficial fascia, resulting in a dumbbell or a collar stud abscess. So if any collar stud abscess is noticed, clinician should always consider the possibility of existence of a deeply placed abscess. Also, the carotid sheath Remember that the carotid sheath and the pretracheal fascia. The carotid sheath and the pretracheal fascia communicates freely with the mediastinum of the thorax inferiorly and with the cranial cavity superiorly. So, both these are the potential pathways for the spread of the infection and the extravasated blood. The infection between the investing layer and the muscular part of the pretracheal fascia usually does not spread beyond the manubrium, upper edge of the manubrium. But the infection between the investing layer and the visceral part of the pretracheal fascia can easily spread into the thoracic cavity anterior to the pericardium. Also, this infection, if it passes anterior to the trachea, it might enter, as I told, into the anterior mediastinum, and if it passes posterior to the esophagus, it might enter the posterior mediastinum. So, coming first to the retropharyngeal space. Retropharyngeal space is a potential space behind the pharynx. This retropharyngeal space provides expansion of the pharynx during deglutition. So in this diagram, notice this is your tongue, this is the posterior end, this is the cervical vertebrae. This is your buccopharyngeal fascia, this is your alar fascia, this is your pretracheal fascia. And this is your retropharyngeal space. So as you can see, this retropharyngeal space is bounded anteriorly by the pharynx covered by the buccopharyngeal fascia and posteriorly by the alar layer of the prevertebral fascia. Laterally, it is bounded by the carotid sheath and its contents. Above, it extends up to the base of the skull. And below, it is limited by the fusion of the alar fascia with the buccopharyngeal fascia in the superior mediastinum. The retropharyngeal space contains the loose areolar tissue, the retropharyngeal lymph nodes, the pharyngeal plexus of nerves and vessels. So, any infection of this retropharyngeal space in this space will result in the retropharyngeal abscess. So what could be the cause? It can result from the infection of the retropharyngeal lymph nodes secondary to the adenoids, from the infections of the sinuses, or from other nasopharyngeal infections. Remember that whenever there is retropharyngeal abscess, the swelling is always in fact paramedian. So if the paramedian swelling is noticed here, then the most probable diagnosis is of the retropharyngeal abscess. Now, because of this swelling, the esophagus might get compressed, resulting in the dysphagia, and when the trachea is compressed, it results in the dyspnea or difficulty in breathing. Sometimes it might also result in the torticollis, which is the stiff and extended neck, and fever. Now, the infection from this retropharyngeal space may further spread into the superior mediastinum, or it may extend behind the carotid sheath and may appear at the posterior border of the sternocleidomastoid muscle. Infection of this space can also, the second space that you will notice lateral to the retropharyngeal space is the parapharyngeal space. So this is your parapharyngeal space. So infection of this space can go into the retropharyngeal space, and hence from the retropharyngeal space it can go into the mediastinum. So in this diagram, again see, this is your buccopharyngeal fascia, this is your alar fascia, this was your retropharyngeal space. So the retropharyngeal abscess may come into this retropharyngeal space and may extend up to the superior mediastinum. Okay. Let us now talk about another space, that is the danger space. So why this space is known as the danger space? This danger space lies between the alar fascia and the prevertebral layer. It is called so because it offers little resistance to the spread of the infection, and infections from here can spread directly to the mediastinum, where till the posterior mediastinum. Okay. So how an infection can come in the danger space? any rupture of the retropharyngeal abscess or a parapharyngeal abscess or from behind the prevertebral space can come into the danger space, and from here the infection may spread into the superior and then into the posterior mediastinum easily. So this space is known as the danger space. Again, please see in this diagram, this is your retropharyngeal space between the buccopharyngeal fascia and the alar fascia. Then between the alar fascia and the prevertebral layer, this is your danger space. Now coming to the prevertebral space, which lies between the prevertebral fascia and the vertebrae. So this space contains basically the prevertebral muscles. How the infection can come in this prevertebral space? From any tuberculosis of any cervical vertebrae or from penetrating trauma. So if the infection is there in the prevertebral space, it might result in swelling in the midline projecting into the posterior pharyngeal wall. The infection from here may extend laterally into the neck and form a swelling posterior to the sternocleidomastoid muscle. The pus may follow, since it is lying deep to the prevertebral layer, so the pus may follow the axillary sheath which is derived from the prevertebral layer and may extend into the axilla, as I have told you. The pus may also perforate the prevertebral layer and may go into the retropharyngeal space and may cause the retropharyngeal abscess also. Clear? The dental infection most commonly involves the lower molar teeth, you all know. The infection spreads medially from the mandible into the submandibular and the masticatory spaces. This might push the tongue forward and upward. Further spread downward may involve the visceral spaces, resulting in the edema of the vocal cords and the obstruction of the airway. Ludwig's angina is an acute infection of the submandibular facial spaces and is very common secondary to the dental infection. A word about the submandibular space, you may understand it later on when you also study about the oral cavity. So the submandibular space is basically the space between the mucosa of the floor of the mouth on one side and the investing layer of the deep cervical fascia on the other side. So, this investing layer extending between the hyoid bone and the mandible and between the floor of the mouth. So, this is your submandibular space. It has further two parts, the sublingual space which lies just beneath the tongue and the submaxillary space which lies below the floor of the mouth. Since the root of the molars extend below the mylohyoid line, and so the infection of the molars result in infection of the submaxillary space, and since the root of the premolars lie above the mylohyoid line, any infection of them can infect the sublingual space. So if this is the case of the Ludwig's angina, the patient experiences trismus, painful swallowing, swelling of the floor of the mouth, as I have told you, which pushes the tongue upward and backward, threatened airways, laryngeal edema and fever. The infection from here can further spread to parapharyngeal and the retropharyngeal spaces. This is all about the deep cervical fascia and its spaces. Thank you.